Hello music lovers and welcome back to Under the Influence. This week we're going to take a look at Bill Monroe's tune Scotland. Now I remember playing Scotland a lot with my cousin Brian and my granddad. My granddad really loved it because it had the droning fiddle open strings that kind of emulated bagpipes, right? Most commonly, Scotland's played with like a twin fiddle kind of thing, right? And they harmonize to enhance that bagpipe type sound, right? I'm gonna hit you with some details real quick. I got my trusty iPad here. Bill Monroe, originally the tune Scotland was recorded along with Panhandle Country on April 8th, 1958. Kenny Baker and Bobby Hicks were doing the twin fiddle thing on that record. It was Joe Drumright on banjo, Ed Mayfield, and of note, last session that Ed played with Monroe before passing away, on guitar, and Bessie Lee Malden on bass. It was recorded at Decca Records, produced by Harold Bradley in Nashville, released as a single on September 29th of the same year. And it also looks like it made Billboard charts that year. It was released on an LP for the first time in '61 as part of a compilation called All Time Country and Western Volume 3. And then again in 1965 as part of Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys compilation called Bluegrass Instrumentals. However, the band had been playing Scotland in live shows since it was recorded as a single. It looks like there's evidence of this from New River Ranch in 1959. So there's your educational part of the show. A little background on Scotland. One of the cool things that I always liked about Scotland as a mandolin player was trying to figure out a way to play the melody because I don't have that sustain, right, that a fiddle player has. Typically, a fiddle player would play this kind of thing. But as a mandolin player, that's always sounded kind of ragged to me. Like where you're just kind of strumming all the strings together. So I think the earliest part of my developmental years is like trying to find my way through picking was trying to find ways to take those fiddle shuffles and those fiddle drones and try to make them my own thing on mandolin. One of the things that being a mandolin player is I didn't have access to the long drawn out notes that a bow has, right? So I had to find ways to play the melody, which a fiddle player would just play, and they would drone that out together and the strings would ring out, creating a bagpipe kind of sound. But the nature of the pick passing through one string and hitting another string, it prevents that kind of thing. So that's where I kind of started some of the earliest developments of finding my way through using a slight two-string kind of cross-picking kind of thing to create the drone, but also still retain precision, I guess. You know, instead of playing like, I'd play like, right? So you see how I'm like using this as an idea. And that's kind of like part of that like bluegrass culture when you're around banjos and guitars a lot. They don't have that sustain like a fiddle does either. And I think a lot of the things that I was picking up in my playing was based off of banjo ideas, you know. And this is one of those tunes that all of the things that I find in my playing, especially on acoustic instruments, kind of overlap, right? And I was kind of hesitant to do Scotland as the first Bill Monroe tune on Under the Influence. Innately, it was going to be Jerusalem Ridge or Wheelhouse or Big Mon or one of those like really ripping instrumentals. But I realized that those instrumentals, they have so many notes that are being played that I don't have to worry about the sustain and emulating another instrument. But Scotland doesn't have that. And if you just play the mandolin part as if you were the fiddle player, you lose sustain and you lose any kind of like rhythmic sense. That's where I'm using that eighth note thing that like a banjo player would play, especially when I start improvising and I get lines like this. Those kind of lines are definitely lifted from banjo players. So that third section's interesting too as a mandolin player because I don't have the bow to get the long hold notes that a fiddle player has, right? And that's kind of how I developed the way of playing the third part. Playing those notes that typically a fiddle player would play with just slides, playing them all as individual kind of notes. And keeping this pedal tone of the high E ringing out. Personal note, you know, I think a lot of that stuff is sometimes where I feel like I have to talk about those like more on the nose musical inspirations, right? But for me, this tune is just personal. It's one of the tunes I played on the porch with my grandfather and my cousin. And my granddad's still alive, and he was just in town. And so I started playing it. He was playing this mandolin. For the fine folks at Collings Mandolins and Guitars, if you're interested, my 92-year-old granddad thinks this thing plays really well. So we were over here and I was playing through some Bill Monroe tunes and you know, Scotland's not one that gets played unless my cousin's around because it's a fiddle tune. So I started playing it and you know, it kind of brought back those memories of us sitting around learning how to play. It's also interesting to me that Scotland is pretty much just one chord the whole time. You know, there's the implication of a 4-chord and a 5-chord, but in general, it's just a whole lot of one. Of course, you know, you can get in the comments and prove at all the points where it's changing to a 4 and a 5, which it is. But in general, the tune is a lot of A. You know, so when you're playing just in one chord, it's good and bad, right? It's good because you don't have to worry about a lot of changes, but it's bad because you have to get really creative because you don't have any chord changes that are like helping you develop new lines. You have to just be creative over one chord, and I find that really kind of inspiring a lot these days. Like I've been listening to a lot of Allman Brothers, and the overlap in that kind of mindset is really interesting, right? Where you only have one chord for a huge length of time that you've got to play over, and you got to make something interesting without having a lot of chord changes to help you along, you know? Like it's something similar to the conversation that I had with Tom Quell last week. Yeah, so go check it out. Bobby Hicks, Kenny Baker, some really incredible fiddle playing, and there's a lot of great versions out there. There's specifically, I'd like to aim you towards a tribute album of Scotland that has Chris Thiele playing mandolin, and it's True Life Blues. So check out Scotland on that one. Check the original version with Bill Monroe, and then check the tribute version on True Life Blues. It's on all your standard Apple, Spotify, all that stuff. If you love the content and you love the channel, please take a second to subscribe. And if you want to support, you can go over to Patreon and have a good time with us over there. I'm going to teach Scotland for an exclusive video for my Patreon members over there. So if you're looking to get your learn on, that's the place. And as always, I appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.